Hi, I'm Matt Shepard.
And I'm Chad Shepard.
Coming up on this edition of Shep, Shower, and Shave, we'll tell you why the Tigers' window on the season is already closed.
Plus, Phil Jackson's out in New York. We always need someone to blame, but will the Knicks be able to turn the page?
And do the executives in this town get the right or fair treatment? That's all coming up here on Shep, Shower, and Shave, brought to you in part by Fifth Avenue. Always been a premier destination in Royal Oak with over 36 cold beers on tap, great food, drink specials, and a kitchen that is open till 2 a.m. And Northwestern Tech. Heating and cooling employers are desperate for trained technicians. They're having to turn down work and are unable to meet the growing demand. So if you're interested, go to Northwestern Tech in Southfield. Call them today, 248-358-4006. Tigers are on a winning streak. Check that. Do you think a 2-game winning streak, do you think winning 2 in a row is a winning streak? I don't.
No, but it feels like it around here.
Well, it feels like it considering what took place out west. And it's funny because before they left for Seattle and San Diego, so many people were out there talking about the Tigers' need for a successful road trip in order to, quote-unquote, not be sellers. They come home 1-6. They were swept by Seattle in 4 games. They won the tail end of the 3-game series in San Diego. It should have been more successful. You and I both know that, but it wasn't. They come home, and now you hear people talk and writers write that this homestand is the most important. It's a 10-game homestand, Kansas City, Cleveland. And my thought is, why? They're 6 games out of first place. Is it fair to say, I hope you agree with this, is it fair to say this team ain't getting the wild card? And the reason I say that, and I know it's late June, but the reason I say that is because right now they are 11th in the wild card standings. At 34 up and 42 down, they are only 5.5 back of the second wild card. But the point is they would have to leapfrog Tampa, Texas, the Angels, the Orioles, the Mariners, the Royals, Blue Jays, and the A's, and they're only 1 game clear of the White Sox. The White Sox, everybody says sellers. Oakland, sellers. Kansas City, most people agree, sellers. Baltimore, sellers. What are we doing in this town right now? Why are we holding on to hope like this?
Yeah, we've mentioned this recently. I think we pretty much both agree that those wild cards are going to be going in the East at the very least. There's one team in the AL East that's below 500.
Well, Minnesota's in that mix.
No, you're right, but at least one. There's one team in the AL East below 500, and in both the Central and the West, you only have the top 2 teams above 500. So the East has been the class of the AL this year. I think the Tigers fans, though, are kind of holding on to this a little longer because everybody knows that this is the closing of the book, so to speak, for the way this current team is built, and that's under the assumption that J.D. Martinez won't be with them after this year, regardless of whether or not they have to move him at the deadline, that Ian Kinsler is likely to be moved, that there are a couple other pieces that are not going to fit in the long-term projection. The youthful talent is kind of pushing its way in, a combination of that and some of the old guard being on its way out. Victor Martinez is another name that fits that description of guys that
he's going to be here next year. No,
right,
there's no question.
But aren't part of the future Tigers.
Okay.
And I think if you strip down some of the pieces that I mentioned and go into next year without making a big signing, which we don't expect them to be spending a lot of money in the offseason, then it's really difficult to look at next year optimistically, hopefully, saying, wait a minute, a stripped-down version of this team has underachieved for the last 3 or 4 years in a row. How can I even get excited about the 2018 Tigers?
So the same fans that are screaming sell are the same fans clinging to hope for this year? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't know that they're the same fans, and both of them represent optimism to a certain extent. This selling, the itch to sell that a lot of Tigers fans have is because they saw what can be brought back when you are a seller. The Tigers were sellers for the first time in a couple of years.
With Fulmer and Norris.
They flipped
and
Soria,
Boyd.
they flipped Cespedes, and those pieces are still here. And not only that, there's some of the more exciting pieces on the current Tigers. As far as the fans, what was the other part you were saying? Sorry.
I was saying the same fans that want them to be sellers are also clinging to hope.
Oh, right, yes. I think the excitement in selling is what I described. The clinging to hope is, like I said, it's just the final closing of the book, so why not take it in while you can, knowing that it's not going to be here in the future? It's kind of like watching a dinosaur
my hope
go
is
extinct.
my hope is that they've watched this team and they've recognized for a while now that this isn't supposed to be built. Look, I hate to compare them to other teams because it's really unfair. It's not the players' fault the way this team has been built. Did you watch Washington last night? Washington's a really exciting team. And I suppose any team that is in first place, any team that is playing 600 ball and has a comfy 8.5 game lead in its division would be exciting. But you watched Washington last night, and again, probably an unfair comparison. They had 7 stolen bases. I don't want Detroit to have the ability to steal 7 bases every night. That was a franchise record. But they have guys who make things happen on the base paths. Detroit has nobody who can make things happen on the base paths. And they have very few guys, even though Mikey Matuk was the #1 defensive play on SportsCenter last night. They have very few guys who can do that regularly defensively. Iglesias, Kinsler, really good double play combination. Really like it, okay? McCann with a great arm and great pop time. I mean, all you got to do is look at the issues that the Cubs are having right now behind the plate. But in general, I mean, defensively, not necessarily known as that type of team. Offensively, on the base paths, not known as that type of team. This team is built from the 1980s to a certain extent. The Earl Weaver, early 80 Baltimore Orioles type team. And they're not it would be very harsh to say they're not fun to watch because I like watching Justin Verlander. I like watching Michael Fulmer. There are certain players I truly enjoy watching. But their inability to win in different ways has caught up to them. And I don't know why people can't figure that out and understand it.
Right. I don't know that watching the 2017 Tigers is going to convert any non-baseball fans into a baseball fan, if that's what you mean by not calling them all that exciting to watch.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good way to represent it. It's a great point, and that lends itself to a bigger discussion. The Red Wings are doing the same thing, are built in a lot of ways the same way. In that
they have speed though.
Yeah, but
they don't have diversity on their team.
Speed, I don't know. Relative speed.
Well, wait a minute.
They have to get faster.
Dylan Larkin, Darren Helm have a lot of speed.
Right, but their back
Andreas
end
Athanasiou
is molasses.
Yeah, right. Andreas Athanasiou has a lot of speed.
Yeah, but
okay.
As we talked about, puck-carrying defensemen are where you need that fleetness of foot.
Yeah, I agree.
Carlson, Subban, guys like that.
Right, and in baseball, what do you need? Don't you think it requires at least a little bit of speed? I mean, I'm not saying everybody's got to be Ron LaFleur, everyone's got to be Ricky Henderson. We need a bunch of Willie Wilsons in the outfield. I'm just suggesting this team has to change, and it has to change drastically. The window is closed because of where they are right now. They're 6 games under 500, or 6 games out in the division, right? They're 5.5 back in the wild card, but they'd have to leapfrog so many teams. I just don't see what the holding on to is all about. I understand from a front office standpoint, they're looking at it by going, we're going to wait and get a best deal, right? They're part of their job is to make sure their team is contending, their team is playing well. This team doesn't have the ability, in my mind, this team doesn't have the ability to charge all the way back. This team doesn't have the ability to overtake anybody in that wild card, which leaves you to the division. Are they better than Kansas City? Well, they beat Kansas City last night, but the Royals have won the season series so far. Are they better than Cleveland? Believe it or not, both teams' ERAs are almost identical, which is surprising. Depth-wise, all this other stuff, Cleveland's ability. I think Cleveland is, by default, I don't think they're an AL championship contender, but I think by default, Cleveland is better than Detroit. So what are we looking at? When do we become realists? And I'm not saying start firing people right now, start trading guys off right now. I'm saying when do we become realistic and know what we're watching?
That's a good
I mean,
good
if it's not after that road trip, when's it going to be? Seriously. Seattle's not a really good team.
Is it denial? I don't get the impression from that many Tiger fans that they think that this team's going to claw itself back, and I don't know that management thinks that that's the case either.
Do you think there's two completely – it's a dichotomy. One fan base thinks, let's keep it going, we've got a chance because of Cabrera and Verlander. One fan base says sell them all. I'm on social media the other night. I'm on Twitter, and people are saying, I'll take anybody. Just bring up everybody in Toledo. I'm thinking, have you watched Toledo play?
Right,
Have you seen what the Mud Hens have done? Have you looked at their roster?
Yeah, it's not the Griffins in the Calder Cup winning.
No, it's
AHL.
not. You're right. It's ridiculous is what it is.
I guess part of this is the 162-game season is nauseatingly long at times when your team is not in contention. Can you imagine being a Padres fan for the last 10 years or something like that, where you actually care? God forbid a season ticket holder.
Yeah.
God rest your soul, bless your soul. But for Tigers fans, I don't know. I think that number, that first group you described, is dwindling and growing smaller. The group that doesn't want to blow it up. And there's a lot of Detroit fans that want to blow up the Red Wings too and want to blow up the Pistons, and maybe they should be blown up, but that becomes the hot button reaction, the quick trigger finger that fans want to see or do. I don't know. I think it's a popular it's better water cooler talk. We can talk about that kind of big scale hypothetical.
Do people realize, maybe they don't, every baseball team's got a 25-man roster, right? 13 of those players are bullpen or starting arms. That leaves you with 12 players. You start 8. That means you have 4 off your bench. How much can really be done by Brad Ausmus and that coaching staff to fix the issues that they have? You're going to start Alex Presley sometimes when he's not hurt. You're going to start Mikey Matuk sometimes, right? You're going to throw in a Dixon Machado and an Andrew Romine. That's it. That's all you got. Miguel Cabrera is going to stay at first base. Ian Kinsler is going to play second base. Jose Iglesias is going to play shortstop. Nick Castellanos is going to play third. Justin Upton's going to play left. J.D. Martinez is going to play right. So you're going to rotate 2 catchers. You're going to rotate Romine and Matuk a little bit, and you're going to find a place for Machado once in a while. That's it. That's all you got. The people who want Toledo means that you want Tyler Collins back, right? Tyler Collins was cleared waivers and everything. You want a guy like Brendan Ryan, their shortstop, who's batting $188. You want James Loney because of what he's done in the bigs before. But guess what? James Loney's batting .218, all right, with very little power. Doesn't have a home run at all. You want people you've never watched and you've never kept up with. That's what people are asking for.
Because people really think anything's better than this.
Exactly.
That's not the case.
It can't be any worse.
That is not the case.
Yes, it can be worse. It can be a lot worse.
Were you watching in 2002?
Right.
Were you watching in 2003?
By the way, the best pitcher for Toledo at times has been Blaine Hardy. He comes up to Detroit, and all you do is bitch and moan about him. You and I both wanted Joe Jimenez. Well, Joe Jimenez came to Detroit, and he blew up. You want Kyle Ryan, but when Kyle Ryan was with Detroit, you got tired of watching him, and down in Toledo, he's got a 4.5 ERA.
It's kind of like the people that legitimately think Alabama can beat the Cleveland Browns.
Right.
You know what I mean? And at some point, you have to blame yourself or just stop entertaining these ridiculous notions. I know these are people that you have to engage at some point or another, but them being that out of touch with reality is going to rear its ugly head at some point.
Matt Den Decker got a deserved promotion recently. Do you want to see Matt Den Decker every single day? Hell no. You never knew who the hell Matt Den Decker was until he got to Detroit. And then you said, who? Let me quickly look him up and see what he's all about. And by the way, he went to Florida, who just won the national championship for the first time in baseball history. I get tired of hearing anything's better than this because that's not true. Not everything is.
Right.
It's a bad team. It's been a bad product. We had a nice 10-year run. It's time to move on, but don't give me that you want Toledo. Now, you mentioned something earlier, and we had just talked about the road trip, about being out west and staying up late, watching those games. I don't want to be the guy who constantly complains about that because we're on the East Coast and they're playing out west. You should be used to it. You should almost acknowledge it going in. However, there is somebody out there with an idea to shorten baseball games. The Tigers play the longest games in the majors right now. Do you think something drastically should be done to change it?
Well, this is a really interesting concept brought up by Jason Gay of the Wall Street Journal, and he writes an article that I'll get right to the point of. Basically posits that weekday or weeknight games should be 7 innings.
Weekday or weeknight games.
Monday to Thursday.
Should be 7
4
innings.
days a week, you're playing 7-inning baseball games. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if you want to spend 4 hours at the ballpark or watching a game, go right ahead. But in the meantime, people all across the country have work the next morning. People have other commitments and things to do. And here's what I think. And maybe I'm dead off on this, maybe I'm wrong. Baseball is becoming, to a certain extent, like golf, where it's background noise or it's background music, and you put it on while you read, you put it on while you're cooking dinner, while you're cleaning the house, something like that, because you cannot sit down and have your attention span retained for 3 hours and 10 minutes 4 or 5 nights a week, when maybe a third of that time is commercials or pitching changes or shots of the crowd or little things like that. So
cute little stories within the broadcast,
like
grasshoppers and stuff like that. No, I'm serious. I mean, let's bring stuff up. Okay. In other words,
I don't want to make a couple things
networks
clear.
and broadcasters are trying to find a way to keep your attention, is what you're saying.
I want to make a couple things clear. One, this problem is not unique to baseball. This is the avenue Jason Gay has taken to approach it. And he actually mentions football in the article, which on average is a longer game. I believe it's 4 minutes longer on average in the NFL.
It is.
And we've all heard the studies about there's 12 minutes of real action in an NFL football game or whatever.
And we know basketball, you can keep it off until the fourth quarter, right? And hockey's much better in person.
Right.
It's a growing problem. If it hasn't heightened, it's a growing problem in television broadcasts right now. No question.
Right, so the general perception that baseball is kind of out of sync with the modern young American, and it's skewing older, as are a number of other sports, as we increase in age and the way that people consume their media. There's some flaws to that study because not everyone who's young that's watching sports is watching on television anymore. They're watching through other models. Right. But the bottom line is the TV audience is collectively getting older for these sports over time, and baseball suffers it as much or more than many of the others. So as a baseball purist, so to speak, what do you think about a 7-inning game?
I think it's a joke. I think it's ridiculous. And if you can't pay attention to it, then don't watch the sport. I mean,
that's fine.
Now that's caveman-like thinking.
Will you still be saying that when the numbers are so bad that MLB has to cut its season and reduce this, and the other thing because it's trying to recoup the loss? Because you can't say that forever.
Hold on. Cutting a season and cutting the game itself are two different things.
I'm saying
baseball used to be 154 games. Now it's 162.
If baseball won't change the duration of its game and has to take other responses in the future to bring the fans back, an example of that may be the one I just described. It could be 1,000 other different things. What happens then when you have to risk the integrity of the game at further levels or at different levels to try and win fans back? Because I like that attitude too. As somebody who likes a lot of things about other sports that are trying to be changed, I wish I could just say, fine, if you don't like it, you don't have to be a fan. But that's not how this works. The money has to go up every year. To keep those owners happy, which, make no mistake about it, that's who the leagues are for, to make those owners happy and for those commissioners to keep jobs, they have to keep revenue sales up. Revenue sales up means more games, bigger stadiums, more tickets sold, bigger TV right deals. It doesn't mean shortening games, shortening seasons. It's money off the table to those people.
Well, then here's what I would ask you, and maybe this is skewed. How did baseball last year draw over 73 million fans? Now,
what is that number?
It was slightly down from 2015,
exactly.
But you're talking about almost 4 million fans in Los Angeles. That's impressive. Okay, Chicago had a record year, and obviously because they won and so on and so forth. But you're still looking, 2016, you still averaged over 30,000 fans per ballpark. Again, not record-breaking, slightly down from 2015, but ranked 11th all-time according to Forbes. In the last, since 2005 through 2016, those have been the top 11 attendance in baseball history. If it's broken, if it's this bad, and look, I at times it can lose me too. But if it's that bad, explain why those numbers are such.
Ballparks are bigger. I don't know how many have been constructed in the past couple of years, but there's people whose job it is to drive people to that ballpark, from marketing, from promotions and things like that. That stuff's all gotten better. I don't think people are going because the baseball's better. I'll tell you that right now. They're going because
So you think they're going because of the marketing?
The entertainment experience at baseball games is better. People aren't going because there's all of a sudden tens of thousands of Americans are waking up.
Hold on a second.
No.
Wait a minute. What's the entertainment experience at a ballpark?
Before. You walk around, there's batting cages to swing at, there's things to buy. Your person who can't sit down and watch 250 pitches or whatever it might be to get through a game walks around the concourse, buys a beer, gets a hot dog, rides the carousel or the Ferris wheel, goes shopping and things like that. There's little kids who are unruly during games. They get picked up by mom or dad and walked around the concourse. They can only sit through 6 innings and things like that.
That's always
Okay, so my
happened.
point to you, if you're going to cite the numbers of people that walk through the turnstiles, MLB doesn't care if you go to one game. They want season ticket holders. Yeah. They want people who go buy jerseys, who go buy apparel, who go spend more money. If you go to one baseball game a summer, baseball's not going to survive. That's how it is. Rob Manfred knows these are problems. That's why he's playing, adjusting with a pitch clock in the minor leagues and things like that. Baseball knows this is a problem. So we're not going to be able to excuse it away by saying the numbers are good and pretending there isn't a problem.
I'm not excusing it. Just don't give me this people go and they go to the game for batting cages and pitching stuff, because you can do that at the corner lot with, that also has a putt-putt green too, and pay a hell of a lot less. People are going for the baseball games just because there's more opportunities to do other things while you're there doesn't mean that's the reason you're going there. The primary reason that over 73 million people went to ball games last year, and over 12 teams had 2.5 million people go through the turnstiles or more, those aren't just one-time people.
But we don't know that.
Well, come on. I mean, it's common sense. At some point, we can use some common sense. It's not just one person, hey, this is my first time, and then I'm done.
I'm not saying every single one of them is either, but you don't know the opposite. And this lends itself to what I talked about earlier. Baseball is becoming a casual fan sport. I think that the women in the city of Detroit are bigger fans of the Tigers than maybe any other team. And I think the pace of the game...
Red Wings are probably pretty close.
I think the pace of the game helps with that as much as anything else, because it is, for someone who never played the sport, it's easier to pick up and understand and put yourself in the player.
You think it's easier to understand baseball than any other sport?
I think the pace of the game allows it to be explained.
Okay.
And I didn't mean to make that a mansplaining thing. What I mean by that is someone who doesn't have the experience, it's harder for someone to appreciate that when it's moving 1,000 miles an hour. I could go to a NASCAR race. It's really difficult for me to appreciate the difficulty of the driving because I've never gone half that fast in my life. Okay?
Right.
But I can go to something that's a lot more slow, maybe a 3-on-3 basketball tournament or something like that. And if I've never played basketball, it's easier to pick up than 5-on-5 at the NBA level.
Yeah.
And I think the pace of baseball allows it to have more casual fans, men and women. That's not a specific explanation to women. Men who never played the game, I think it's easier to pick up baseball, and football I'd put right in that same category.
So you're making a case on why the sport is fine.
More fans doesn't equal more dollars. It's more casual fans. You want mobilized fans that are in action and spending money. And I don't know that baseball is headed in the right direction when it comes to that.
I'd like to know the sport that picks up casual fans that are willing to spend money, number one. Number two, if you're bringing in 73 million people overall, those people are spending money. The money is being spent on tickets. The money is being spent on parking. The money is being spent on items to either eat or wear. It's happening. I don't understand. Look, you're a lot younger than I am. I can appreciate your vantage point from this. Although you're a baseball fan and you do watch baseball. So maybe your perspective is better than anybody else's because you can speak from the mindset of not being able to sit back and wait for things to happen, like often people in my generation have to, or the fact that you do love baseball. Younger people today want everything right now, and they want action all the time. And you're not getting that in any sport.
Well,
and if it's
every
baseball,
other facet of society gives that to you, right or wrong, sports has to adjust, or people aren't going to care as much, period. And I don't mean to be this big harbinger of doom and gloom or whatever. People my age don't care as much. They just don't care.
Then what do they care about?
It's a short attention span world.
I know that. That's not just your age. That's more and more people today in general. Give me the thing that keeps their attention long enough that they actually do care.
I don't think anything keeps their attention for over 3 hours unless it's a video game or something like that.
There you go. The video game stuff, right?
Well, we don't have to work our way down to that rabbit hole because we've begun this discussion about 3-hour baseball games and whether
I think baseball games are too. Don't get me wrong.
You're basically taking the position that baseball's okay and go ahead with the 3-hour games. And what I'm saying,
that's not what I'm saying.
Well,
I'm saying avoid the 7-inning games. I never said 3-hour baseball games.
Then you must acknowledge though that baseball has a problem with the speed, with the slowness of the game, and the ability to retain people's attention, especially young people. That cannot be argued.
I'm not going to disagree with that. Because it happens with people who are my age, too. It's not just young people. I don't think that's necessarily fair to just blame it on young people. All I'm telling you is that 7-inning games ruins the game.
How does it do that? What is the sanctity of the game?
All you're doing, what's the sanctity of the game? For crying out loud, you got an 8th inning and a 9th inning. Those are pretty damn important innings. You're asking a league, this guy is, you're asking a league to Monday through Thursday play 7 innings, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to play 9 innings. Think about that for a minute. How whacked is that? Why not just do it for basketball? When basketball is doing it when they play a Tuesday or Wednesday game, just play 2 halves, and then on the weekend play 4 quarters in the NBA. In hockey, when they play during the week, let's just play 2 periods instead of 3, but on the weekends, let's play 3. All those sports take plenty of time, too. What baseball needs to do is not go to a 7-inning game. Baseball needs to fix its issues of batters in the box at the right time and adhering to rules that they already have. That's the problem right now.
You know you're going to infuriate the players by doing this. How many players have a routine on the mound in the batter's box that will be disrupted by a clock? There is a clock out there right now. It's just not abided at all, almost.
I know, yeah.
I mean, sometimes the pitcher doesn't get the ball back before it's in single digits counting down.
Right.
But if my point is baseball has a problem, and I'm not pretending this is a perfect solution to cut things to 7 innings, and I'm not saying I would immediately adopt it the way Jason Gay's laid it out in the Wall Street Journal, but if something has to give eventually, you might be unwilling to make this compromise now and be forced to make a greater compromise later as far as the sanctity of the game.
All right, let me give you an example. In 1984, and I always bring this year up because that's my team, okay? The average length of a baseball game was 2 hours and 30 minutes. Could you live with that? The average length of a baseball game in 2014 was 3 hours and 6 minutes. You're talking about, what is it, 30? You're talking about over 35 minutes is what you're talking about, an extra 35 minutes. For some people, that's the ride home. For some people, that is, that's gold.
It's a
right
big
there.
deal.
It ends up being a big deal. Yes, it does. Why did baseball in 1984 play so much quicker?
I would guess part of that has to do with the way the game is presented on television. I would guess there were either shorter or more infrequent commercial breaks at that time. I don't know that that's correct, but that's my guess.
I would strongly disagree with that because I think baseball is the one sport that has built-in commercial breaks.
Well, maybe the duration of the break is
You're
not
walking
the same.
off the field?
No, I get that, but maybe the duration of the break is not the same.
I think it has to do with pitchers and how quickly.
I was going to get to that, but part of that is what has built up this. How many camera angles we have coming from center field and things like that, where I think there's a lot of, I don't know if paranoia is the right word, but concern about pitch steal or about sign stealing.
Okay.
And I think the longest situations are man on second, 1 out, and you're
stepping off the mound.
You're changing the signs over and over again. You come out and you have a meeting because you think he's caught on, and then you adjust, and then he doesn't. You throw back over, and that's the stuff that really adds the time. But that, and I know you weren't belittling this. That 35 minutes is significant.
Absolutely,
if you've ever watched a movie that's about 35 minutes too long, you understand how it can change a great experience into something that's absolutely mind-numbing.
Right.
And if baseball. The problem is, I guess I don't know how to construct a rule set that enforces a quicker delivery to home plate without screwing with the routine that's gotten the pitcher to where he's at.
There's a few things that I believe. First of all,
and last thought. Sorry to cut you off.
All right.
It's kind of like developing a free throw routine. If you're a basketball player, like Richard Hamilton used to dribble twice to his right, once to his left,
right.
spin. drop it. It's kind of like they say, "Hey, Richard, we're changing the rules this year. You just got to pick the ball up and shoot it. You can't dribble it or spin or do anything."
They did it in golf with Sergio Garcia. You're taking too long, right?
In golf, you have people like that, and like Kevin Na, who will take 18 and a half practice swings before finally approaching.
Yeah, but my point.
That's a different issue. In a very
my
real
point is they said something to expedite the process.
But there's already rules in golf about pace of play from the beginning of time. There's never been a pace of play rule in baseball until this became a problem.
There's rules of pace of play in baseball on how long a pitcher has to deliver. Why do you think they put the clock up?
Now that's there.
No, it's always been there. They just finally put the clock up.
They're just now enforcing it?
Yes. Umpires are supposed to be the ones enforcing it, and they never have. So there's a number of things, I think. Obviously, the number of pitchers used can be a little monotonous. You know what I mean? Batters in the batter's box and so on and so forth, that gets to be a bit of an issue. But I think what needs to be done is, in so many words, tell the guy to get in the batter's box and let's go. You don't have to walk around every single time. Pitcher gets the ball, let's go. It's not. I don't think it's that complicated. I really don't. I think there's an opportunity there for people. Look, games today. Right now, I said 2014 games today are averaging 3 hours and 5 minutes. That's way too long for people today in any sport. I don't care if it's baseball or anything else. We're talking about an extra 35 minutes or so from way back when I play. And I think it's getting to be ridiculous, whether it be batters fidgeting with their gloves, slower home run trots, so on and so the number of mound visits and all that other stuff, which has actually been, kept in line with stuff. But it's ridiculous how long it takes. I don't think it has anything to do with the commercial breaks. I think that timing has remained the same. I think it's more about the leeway. And lastly, and I think the most important thing is the strike zone. I think the strike zone is so damn small today that you're almost inviting long at-bats. Make guys swing the bat, and you'll be better off.
I think the strike zone thing's a good point, and that I blame squarely on the shoulders of Fox Tracks, because that box is – I hate watching baseball with that box, and now you can't watch a baseball broadcast without that box. You're right, and I was in the process of agreeing with you about the quickness of pitchers delivering to the mound.
Yeah. Why do you think Justin Verlander, guys love playing behind Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, Doug Fister? They hate playing behind guys like Armando Galarraga in the past, and guys like I don't know. There are certain guys today they can't. I mean, Sanchez. They hate playing behind Sanchez because of how long it takes. You can watch Tigers games at Fifth Avenue. Go check it out, folks, and tell them you listen to the Shep Shower and Shave podcast. We could use the support, and they could use the traffic as well. They got 40 HD TVs, a 14-foot HD projection screen, and a one-of-a-kind sportsbook viewing area. No better place in Detroit to feel the excitement when you watch the Tigers, Wings, Lions, Pistons, Michigan State. It's Fifth Avenue, unknown for its unrivaled weekend nightclub experience as well. Check it out, Fifth Avenue in Royal Oak, over 36 cold beers on tap. Speaking of the Tigers and the way they've built and so on and so forth, we look at Al Avila right now, and he's getting a lot of heat. And I understand why, and I think it's justified. A lot of heat on putting this team together. Who do you think in this town has deserved or been undeservedly and ceremoniously criticized for how they've built the teams? Who do you think's done the best job of building their respective team? Or has anybody done a good job in building their respective team?
I think for the longest time, Ken Holland was viewed as the gold standard, not just in this town, but in his sport, if not across all 4 American sports.
I would say the Red Wings, not necessarily Ken Holland.
Okay, well, his hand in developing that roster, which you're right, a lot of credit belongs to people like Jim Nill and Jim Devellano as well. And
Scotty Bowman. Yeah.
No question about it. I did not mean to make that a one-man job. That perception has certainly shifted. Ken Holland is a guy with 1 year left on his contract. We've talked about it at length, the way that Tigers fans feel about him and the direction that he's taken the franchise.
I think Joe Dumars was seen as a good franchise builder. They went to 6 straight Eastern Conference Finals. I think there's something to be said for that, right?
It's interesting that he couldn't leave in better graces as well, given the accomplishments that he was able to help the Pistons achieve, and that's a good point. I think it's still quite early in his tenure, and by no means am I sealing the case on this, but I have absolutely loved the way Bob Quinn's come in and taken over the Lions, and I would be very excited to watch that project continue to grow.
Yeah.
I think in general, in this town, we don't give GMs a ton of credit when things are going well.
Give them a ton of blame, though.
We like to tear them down when things are going wrong. And it's a delicate balance. We touched on it briefly with Osmus in terms of taking over a team that maybe you didn't build and being hamstrung and how many adjustments you can make, how many tweaks you can make that would normally be some of the greater benefits of your managerial position. Some of that you're neutered, it's stripped away from you because you're not able to make some of the moves that you feel you should be able to. So when that's the case, what's the percentage of blame that goes where? Sometimes that's how you result in a fresh start being best for everybody.
Absolutely. And look, I guess the reason I bring that up is because Phil Jackson was let go today. You can call it firing from James Dolan, or you can call it resigning because he hasn't gotten the job done. But the bottom line is, in 3 years, Phil Jackson in New York had 80 wins on 166 losses. His winning percentage was the 5th worst in all the NBA during that tenure. And I think he's made a number of mistakes, which is pretty obvious. The Carmelo Anthony, the tenuous relationship that he had with Carmelo Anthony, the Kristaps Porzingis recent exposure where Porzingis didn't even want to go to the exit interview because he thought their franchise was in such disarray, and Jackson basically said he was open to trading the team's best players. A 21-year-old kid. He's a good player. He's a good kid too, from all I've read. His digging at the Golden State Warriors finally losing a playoff game. Last year, his digging at LeBron James and the people he hangs out with. So many different things off the court that he had a problem with, in addition to the forcing of the triangle. Think about Carmelo Anthony, the number of general managers he has had to go through, the number of head coaches he had to go through, and Phil Jackson's defiance / stubbornness and his unwillingness to change and not recognize, which has surprised me, that he manages, or was managing, in a players' league. It's more about the players than it is about the general manager and about the head coach. Now, people can frown at that. They can wince at that and not necessarily like it, but that's the way it's been. Now, I should retract a little bit and say, I shouldn't say it's not about a general manager's league, because the general manager's got to put guys together. Okay, he's got to put a team together. He's got to recognize what fits and what doesn't fit. So it's not necessary. But let's face it, most people feel like Carmelo Anthony runs the Knicks. Most people feel like certain players run certain teams. LeBron James in Cleveland, for example. And Phil Jackson took a dig at Steve Kerr. Those are the things. I just don't know what you expect the end reward to be if you're Phil Jackson. And this is free. We talk about destination sites a lot. Think about this. Agents were telling anybody who would listen. Wasn't there a Sports Illustrated article about this? Agents were telling anybody who would listen, New York is toxic. You don't want to send your player there. When did you ever hear that before? Everybody supposedly wants to play for New York. And on top of all this, and I've said this ad nauseum before, New York's the most overrated basketball market in the country. Everybody thinks like that's where you got to be, and wow, if you can make it there, and so on and so forth. Forget the Frank Sinatra song. They've won 2 championships in the history of the franchise, okay? They're not any elite franchise. It's not like they're Boston. They're not Los Angeles. They're not Chicago. Hell, the Pistons had better runs than the Knicks ever did. I get tired of hearing about how New York this, New York that. Phil Jackson should have been fired. He's out of touch with what's going on. I don't think there's anybody close to that type of toxicity here in Detroit, but it shows you how quickly people can turn on you, because just 3 years ago he was receiving standing ovations at Madison Square Garden.
The Knicks are prolific at wasting money,
right,
or poorly investing and mismanaging money. There's an article on ESPN here about poor financial decisions made by the James Dolan-led Knicks. Phil Jackson's getting $20.5 million to go away.
Oh my God.
Larry Brown got $18.5 million to go away.
What Isaiah Thomas get?
That's not listed on here, but
okay.
Allen Houston paid $32.4 million to stop paying. Phil made $11 million over his 9 years with the Bulls, which is crazy to think about in its own right.
Right.
He's made $60 million in 3.25 years with the Knicks. Gone 90 and 171 in that span under his direction.
Incredible.
He was the highest paid American executive in sports by $2 million. Theo Epstein makes 10.
Oh,
Phil Jackson made 12. last year.
Wow.
How about this? He worked for them for 1,200 days, made $60 million, $50,000 a day to drive that plane into the ground. It's inconceivable. So this is the thing. If you're I know it's laughable. I don't know what
I laugh because it's the Knicks. I would be crying and
how
raving mad if it were Detroit.
How can you remain a fan of that team? And I'm not trying to be facetious. I understand you're born, raised a Knick fan. Your dad and your grandpa were a Knick fan. Whatever. You feel like you're in it. How do you think you're going to hurt James Dolan? How do you think you're going to get him to handle the franchise differently or, God forbid, sell it? The only way for you to do that is to stop buying your jerseys and stop buying your tickets.
Yeah.
If you're okay with your team spending the millions and millions and millions of dollars that they are because you think it's not your money, think again, because that comes back to you in ticket sales, in revenue sales in some way, even in the parking around the stadium. It will come back to you. And when it comes time to build a new venue, I know they're in a historic one, but when it comes time to build a new venue, you damn sure better believe they're going to ask for taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
So don't think that it doesn't affect you. And if you can't take a stand against your team and find a team that's run properly and fiscally responsibly, then don't complain when they waste the money and continue to flounder at the bottom of the standings because you know what you're signing up for if you're a Knicks fan.
Let me ask you this, because I think a lot of people – look, when you hear Phil Jackson, what do you think? You think championships, right?
Yeah, it's synonymous with the rings.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what a lot of people forget, though, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Phil Jackson because he's done it. I hated that he was with the Bulls. It drove me crazy. But, you win championships in Chicago. You win championships in L.A. I don't believe that just because you have a superstar, or in their cases, a couple of superstars, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, whomever in Chicago, they added various other elements, Dennis Rodman and so on and so forth. And then in Los Angeles, Shaq and Kobe, that can be a difficult thing. Massaging those egos can be a very difficult thing. So this guy wins as many rings as he did. I give him a ton of credit. And it's not easy to run a franchise, and I think he's recognized that, right? How much of his legacy does this hurt? And I guess the reason I bring it up this way is because Pat Riley was always viewed as his rival, right? Because of how well Pat Riley did as a head coach in Los Angeles and Miami, and actually was in New York too and did a good job as a head coach in New York. But Pat Riley, he's run a successful operation in Miami. Phil Jackson can't say that. How much do you think this 3-year window ruins his type of reputation in the long run?
I think it depends on what's next. If he's able to successfully turn a different franchise around, assuming he'll be given the keys to one in the first place. I think if he's able to write a next chapter...
No way. There's no way.
You don't think anyone else gives him a shot?
Nope. Not at running a franchise. He may be a consultant.
What about the Buss family now that the older brothers are perceivably on the way out and Jeannie's running the show again?
Well, first of all, he and Jeannie Buss have broken up. Second of all, Magic Johnson.
The respect was there, and it seemed that
Magic Johnson
professionally they could remain.
But Magic Johnson's running that organization, and Rob Pelinka's the general manager, and they're just starting out, and they've been widely viewed as successful early on, much more than Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson should be remembered for 11 rings as a coach, period. But you can't ignore what he's done as a general manager here, or as a president, I should say, and running a franchise, and quite honestly, ruining the franchise. That's what he's done. As an executive, he's ruined the Knicks. He has 2 years left on his contract. He had a problem with Derek Fisher. He had a problem with Kurt Rambis. He hires Jeff Hornacek. From his office, his big cherry wood, table and his big leatherback chair, he's tried to force the triangle offense on people. And it just wasn't happening, and it wasn't fair either. Think about this. He traded Tim Hardaway. Tim Hardaway's a better player than Jerry Grant, right? And he had Jerry and Grant come, and he hasn't been terrible. The draft picks he's had.
How about this? Yeah, I read that the other day. Since he's been in charge, the Knicks are the only team not to draft an underclassman. They've taken seniors and Europeans exclusively. Not a single freshman, sophomore, or junior since he's
because he doesn't believe in the AAU system.
10 straight picks to lead out the draft this year were freshmen.
You know what he is? I mean, he's Matt Millen. I'm not kidding you. He's Matt Millen. He's the Matt Millen of the NBA. And now he's done. And people in New York are rejoicing, celebrating, and hoping. They're literally saying what Tiger fans, what you and I, this comes full circle. What you and I talked about with Tiger fans, it can't get any worse. That's what Knicks fans are saying right now.